I grew up in sales. My first job out of high school was in sales, slang in the newspaper, in a boiler room, kind of sales in high school. I thought that to be better, I needed to be super technical because I was selling a technical product. I was later told by one of the best reps there, don't do that. Stay in your lane.
Welcome to the ISP NextGen Podcast, where we speak to salespeople about their journeys to help you demystify the profession. Now, today we are joined by Sherman Urrutia. I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly there, Sherman. Head of Global Sales at Nyota Ai. Sherman, did you want to take a minute to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit more?
I will. And Jordan, I will start off by saying it's Sherman Urrutia. And don't worry, because no one ever gets that. You can imagine how many times I've heard all different variations of the name. But so Sherman Urrutia, I'm head of sales at Nyota Ai. I've spent the better part of the last decade working in, open source space, kind of database sales, really great companies like Neo4j, InfluxDB, company that are like the number one in their relative space. And, for me, I think we were chatting about last week, I grew up in sales. My first job out of high school was in sales. I was slang in the newspaper, in a boiler room, kind of telemarketer type of, sales in high school. And I loved it. Ever since then, it's been one of my passions, is talking to people, connecting with people over the phone, over video calls, and really trying to see how we could help.
Brilliant. And what was it that drew you to sales in that first instance?
That's a super fair question. I think initially it was my desire to have a car. I was in high school and, I was like, so I need to reverse engineer how I'm going to get a car. And I got my license. I got all that bit sorted. And for me, it was like, hey, there's nothing else that I can really do that is going to allow me to take the finite amount of time that I had, just a few hours after school, and kind of maximize those earnings with, earning commissions, and sales was it for me. Like I could go in, work a couple hours, make a ton of, newspaper sales, and, make a good amount of money for someone in high school.
Yeah. I similarly, I think mine was the car or the subwoofer to go in the back. I actually bought before I had the car. It was there ready, waiting to go. Love that. Now, of course, sales does have some huge upside, but it also comes along with various challenges along the way. What were some of those challenges that you faced early in your career, and how did it shape your approach to sales?
Yeah, so there's a ton of challenges that come in sales from the very basic. You get a lot of no's. So you have to figure out a way to build some thick skin, how to understand, I need to hear no a couple of times. I need to be ready to hear lots of no's and understand why is the no, why is someone telling me, no, I don't want this, or, is that just their first response? People don't want to be sold to. They don't want that. And then really come in with value. But I think maybe the biggest challenges that I've had in my sales career is just kind of changing, making pivots. I went from, selling the newspaper while I was in high school. After college, I was in real estate finance. And I did that up until the real estate crisis. So I was loving what I was doing. I was helping people, first-time homeowners buy homes, investors secure financing for their fix and flips. It was really good. It was a really good time. And then the market changed, kind of the money dried up, loans dried up, and I had to figure out, so this isn't it for me. I'm in my early 20s and this market is changing. I need to do something else. So it's kind of understanding where you are, where the market is, and making that change is really hard. And for me, it was, I switched from that into criminal justice tech, where, I spent maybe 5-6 years. While it was tech, criminal justice it's a different field. You're dealing with courts and probations and sheriff's departments and criminals and all these things. And, it was sales, but it was just different. But again, trying to find ways to make that better. And for me, because everything is tied to sales, that's what motivated me at the time. My big why was like, how do I, take my income to the next level? How do I take my learnings to the next level? How do I take my positions and kind of go up the ladder? And, experience teaches you those things, failing teaches you those things. And so it's always been just knowing when to pivot, and making the most of the opportunities that are in front of you.
Typically, well, especially in the past couple of years since COVID, things have been changing at a rate of knots. So trying to stay ahead of the curve is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
As a result of those changes, we typically feel them most harshly being in sales, being that front line for any business. Obviously, big part of the role is prospecting, trying to identify those great fit companies who we should be speaking to there. And it is essentially the lifeblood of any sales role, having control and ownership of your own pipeline and generating that pipeline is crucial. It typically defines winners and losers in the space. It can be seen as a bit of a dark art. It's tough. So what do you think makes an effective prospecting strategy today, given all the changes that we have seen in buyer behaviors and outreach methods and tools available?
Yeah. No, I mean, what a great question. I think even if you look at the last year to 18 months or so, how things have changed with AI, I think it's really changed the game. I think that effective prospecting, like kind of one, you have to have a strategy going into it and trying to balance out, how can I be relevant, maybe not like hyper relevant, right? I don't want to say, hey, we have the same kind of dog or something, or the super cliche, hey, we went to the same school, but trying to be relevant, trying to be value driven and be data informed. So kind of balancing all of that. I think that's really critical. So for me, I'm always looking at, when I'm doing prospecting, it has to be ICP driven. There's some very specific targeting here. I have to have a laser focused list of accounts of specific personas, people that align to my ICP, and then pepper in maybe some intent data to prioritize those leads. Then that personalization at scale. How do you do that? How are you maybe going to be relevant to people? How are you going to stand out from the noise? Because we spent the last, 4 or 5 years with all these tools that allowed everyone to scale their outbound through kind of massive spamming emails. And coming out of that, I think, there was just so much. And so you want to stand out. You want to have a message that speaks directly to this person's role, maybe their challenges, maybe their goals, and then really find a way to tie that back to your unique, value prop. And do that without sounding cheesy, without including too much fluff, without sounding creepy, because you have all of these messages. And I inbox, like I'm sure yours is filled with crappy email, copy. Yeah. And so luckily that kind of tells us what not to do. And then the last thing is really having a strong omni-channel approach. So for me, when I'm looking at prospecting, it has to combine LinkedIn. I'm a big believer of LinkedIn. Been on LinkedIn for a long time. I have a really big network of people, and for me, it's like, if I'm having some interaction with someone, we're connecting. If I've met you at a conference, we're connecting. If I did a discovery call, we're connecting. Any opportunity I can, we're connecting. I want to, it's like your modern day Rolodex. Like it's where you're connecting, where you're keeping your network. And you're trying to do that with, not just with like random folks, like not just like the people who have these LinkedIn automation built out. There's a place for that, for sure. But for me, it starts with like, I really want my network to be filled with people who I've met, who I've touched, who I've interacted with on some level. So we have the LinkedIn, we have phone calls, like I feel like a lot of people were saying, hey, cold calling is dead for a long time, but you know what? It's not. Pick up the phone, make some dials. I think you have to have the LinkedIn, the calls, the email, all of these things playing together to really stand out. I love getting on the phone. I love calling people. I love telling them that it's a cold call. We've booked a really amazing opportunity with a big old boring business. Someone that, it's not my founder was like, that's not the kind of person. And I had to sell him on the idea of why it was. And now it's one of our biggest opportunities that we have. And now, so we're thinking now, how do we find more big, boring businesses to sell into because they really need what we're offering?
Yeah.
So, and it was all cold. It was just a cold call, and it just, you run into people who, if your list is tight and you have a reason why you're reaching out that ties into maybe initiatives that you can find out or things that they may be working on or content that they're pushing out, or it's going to happen. It's not just like a volume. I'm not just trying to reach out to 20,000 people this week. Like, I really need to do it strategically.
I think you touched on the ICP there, and as well, prioritization, right? It's not always going to be the right time to reach out via the right channel. So perhaps we move the conversation towards ICP and really ensuring that you're doing the right activity in the right places. So how do you go about defining and refining the ICP, and what are the key factors that you consider when doing that?
Coming from Neo4j Influx CP, we had some of that was already kind of defined and done, and it was like a machine that was already going. So for me, being a rep there, I just fit into this machine, and I was able to take what we knew from our wins, and I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I could take, here are my wins, here are my customers today, here are the people that I need to reach out to. Who are the like customers like these people? Today at Nyota, we're a small company. Everything that's happened to date has been, founder led, and really trying to figure out, like, it's a saturated market. There's a lot of people doing this kind of AI note taker. Who's my buyer? Do I need to go, Nyota started with this like built for engineers, internal calls for product people, engineering folks. I come in and I'm like, well, that's cool and all. I don't know that they're the ones that are actually going to buy and drive deals for us. I think we need to refocus on sales success support. Those are the people who have the budgets. Those are the people who need our tool, who use our tools. And so ICP, right, it's living, it's evolving. It's, trying to find kind of your best fit customer. And so if you don't have past wins, it's a lot of testing, a lot of like, hey, I need to go down, one of the plays we're running is, we had an inbound MSP come in and they were like, hey, we sell managed IT and I have the set of customers that have this type of problem and maybe Nyota is a good fit. So then we needed to unpack that and say, okay, why? What's going on here? Well, it turns out that a lot of these MSPs that provide managed IT services to their end customers are starting to see a lot of AI transformation projects. And in those projects, companies are trying to understand, okay, well, how do I bring in AI into my org in a controlled, easy to use way where there's going to be adoption amongst teams where it's standardized. So like not everyone's just using Claude or ChatGPT or this, that, or the other. And so for us, it was like, okay, we need to take this and see if we can replicate this. So now I'm chatting with a ton of MSPs who are providing managed IT services, who are involved in AI transformation projects, and they want to look at an AI note taker. And so now that's one way that we're like, okay, that's one that works for us. And so we've had some really good wins there. But it's just continuously, what's the industry? What's the company size? What's the revenue? What does the org look like? What's the maturity? How much funding? Like all these different things. And then once you have those factors, it's like, well, as I'm thinking about buyer personas, who are the titles? Who are the roles? Who are these people? What are their goals and challenges? Like the op that I was mentioning, he was brought in as a VP of sales engineering to his company, big boring business. And his goal was to modernize what they were doing. They're like manufacturing, kind of molding and manufacturing for like the automotive space. And one of his first projects was like incorporating a CRM. He's like, look at this like home built CRM that I have. And he's like, and I have these manual notes that we're still taking from calls. And immediately I was like, that manual notes from calls? Like, I know that when I show you what we do, it's going to blow your mind. And so as I was, chatting with him and talking and, trying to do some discovery and kind of peeling back why he did this and where's the value and who owns this ultimately, like who told you to do this? Well, it turns out that this is a CEO driven initiative for 2025 that is like maybe top 2 priorities for them to get sorted.
Yeah.
And he's struggling with adoption because there's a ton of manual processes here. And Nyota can come in and solve that like that. And so he's taken my cold call. He's, started a trial kind of during the Christmas holiday and, super active. But it's really digging into like, those people and then replicating that. Now that I've seen that works for this guy, finding more of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great point. I think that there's a few things that really jumped out there. One, it's rarely a set and forget exercise defining the ICP. It's the living beast, as you rightly mentioned. And the second is it's all about getting that feedback, testing, optimizing. If you've got a ton of customers, identifying the similarities between those closed won deals, between those customers that have been with you for however many years that just won't churn. They're super loyal because they're getting value, and then identifying lookalikes. And then if you don't have that, talk to the market, explore, talk to these different personas and see if there is a use case there that you can build out a great fit and go from there. So again, the adaptability piece coming back through again. Now, I want to move the conversation towards qualification and discovery. When you are qualifying a prospect, is there a qualification framework that you follow? Are there any sort of key signals that you're really keeping an eye out for?
I came up in a time where like all things Bant, like it was like, let's follow Bant, and Bant, is how we're creating opportunities and like what you needed to report on. So very basic, very, very, easy to use. The really, scale for bigger, complex deals, multiple players. For me, when I talk to someone today, I'm looking for like, help me understand your current state. Like, how are you doing this today? Walk me through what does today look like for you? So for me specifically now, it's like, how are you, kind of managing your notes? How are you taking meetings and then, following up on your tasks, or, taking this information and putting it into your CRM or whatever it is for Nyota, right? And then from there, once I understand how they're doing it today, it's trying to understand, okay, well, what happens if you do nothing, right? If nothing changes, if they're, so what? Like, help me out, walk me through that bit. And so for me, that's really telling. Is like, is there a problem? Is there not a problem? Is there a pain and an impact here that we really need to address and uncover and understand? And then it's, thinking through, so what do you want this to look like? I think one of my favorite questions when chatting with folks is like, if you had a magic wand, what would this look like? Yeah. And I think every time I ask that question to someone on a call, I always get 2 things. One, I get a chuckle because maybe not a lot of people ask that question or it just sounds funny. And 2, I get a long speech about if they had a magic wand, what they would do. And that tells me that I'm usually onto something, because they'll go into big detail about what's the problem, why this is the problem, how it impacts them, who else it impacts, and what they're trying to do, what they've tried to do already, what's failed, what they would like to see, all these. So they give me all that information. So that's my favorite question to ask. And then it's for me, it's really good to understand, like, trying to understand, like, what are the obstacles here? Like, what's kind of keeping you from doing anything, or what's kept you from making change, or help me understand that bit. But for me, it's looking at those things initially. And if I can find that bit and have a really good, deep conversation really on those 4 points, I know that I have something. But I think what's also important is to qualify people out, is understanding that you can't just have happy ears. People can't just say stuff and you just, I'm creating another opportunity, or I'm adding to my pipeline. But it may not be the type of problem. It may not be a big enough problem. And ultimately, we have finite resources. I only have so much time in the day that you have to, work on the opportunities that really make sense for you, the opportunities that are like your biggest customers, not just everyone who, starts talking to you. Because qualifying people out, I think, is really important today.
Yeah. It's both protecting your time, protecting the prospect's time, but also protecting that relationship. Because, as we said, timing might not be right at this minute, but it's a whole lot more likely that someone will come back to you and will think about you when they are facing a big enough problem, if you have been respectful and said, look, do you know what? It doesn't sound like this is something that we should move forward with right now. It long term, it's the best thing. You touched on it briefly there around taking that discovery a mile deep rather than a mile wide, really getting through that surface level pain, and getting deeper into the problem. Do you have any sort of question funneling techniques that you use? How do you ensure that you're getting to the root cause rather than, just focusing on the symptom?
Yeah. For me, what works really well is kind of asking why over and over and over. Why is that a problem? Why? Kind of keep going through that. Because most people, their initial response is surface level. No one wants to just go I don't know you. I just met you. We're just on our first call. Like, we're just starting to date. Like, what's going on here? So it's really understanding and asking them, well, why is that a problem? Help me understand more, and keep just coming back with questions, digging in on what, I always look at, my biggest wins, they had these set of problems or this set of pain, and they were going down these scenarios. So I'm always trying to tie those back with calls that I'm having. And if I hear one of those things come up, one of those topics or one of those issues or pains, then I know that I'm going to dig deep on that very specific point until I get to, where I think we peeled back the onion enough, where I'm like, okay, now this makes sense. And for me, I love, I enjoy testing people a bit and kind of pulling back, it shows like, is this actually a priority? Because you might have a really big problem, but you might not really want to do anything about it. Or you might not be in the power, you might not have enough power to do anything about it. So it's asking all of the questions. It's just getting in deep and then making sure that you're talking to the people or team that are going to have the resources allocated to solving this problem. But yeah, it's lots of whys.
Yeah, indeed. And then in terms of ensuring that you're maximizing and optimizing time, because it can be easy to get called off on tangents or end up going down rabbit holes. How do you ensure that there's structure throughout those qualification and discovery calls?
Yeah. So what's worked really well for me, and part of this is that I've worked kind of in for about 10 years or so, I worked in the database space. So for me, I always had like an SC on my call. It's like one of those things where I'm a sales guy. I'm not I've had very technical calls. And what I love about working closely and having a great SC, and at my last company, for me, it's like we're Batman and Robin. And with my last SC, like that was our nickname. You guys are Batman and Robin. Up for discussion, who's Batman and who's Robin. But it's a lot of like good cop, bad cop. So a lot of preparation on our side. Hey, here's where we are with this call, or here's who we're talking to, here's where we're trying to get to. So we had internally as a team, we had an agenda. We knew what we wanted to get out of this call. And so we were keeping each other in check. And I think one of the easiest ways for me to do that is to say, hey, Jordan, did I miss something? Like just taking a pause. We're salespeople, we love talking, but it's pausing, passing it to someone else and be like, did I miss something? Because your SC, he's the guy listening there. He knows what you're saying, but maybe you missed something.
Yeah.
And that's, working with a really good SC who kind of understands that, who understands you, I think is key. We don't all have that. We're not all selling technical products, but for me, that's been, really helpful.
Referencing the fact that we all make mistakes and we learn from them, if you cast your mind back to that first qualification discovery call you made, what is the one thing that you would change?
I would stay in my lane. So I think my first discovery call at Neo4j, I wanted to, for some reason, I thought that to be better, I needed to be super technical because I was selling a technical product. I was later told by one of the best reps there, don't do that. Stay in your lane as a sales guy. There's a reason why we have SCs. Let the SCs be the SCs and you be the sales guy. You drive the call, you ask your questions, you admit when you don't know something. And so I for the longest time, and especially on my first call, I studied for it. I was like, man, this graph database thing is hard. This is not what I knew from criminal justice tech or real estate finance. It was very different. And so I would do that. I would just focus on being the best sales rep that I could be early on in my career versus trying to be super technical. But I wasn't an SE. That wasn't my role.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this overwhelming need, I think, to know the answer to the question, when often the best thing to do is hold your hands up, admit, I don't know the answer, but I assure you, I will go and find out the answer. I will ask the relevant person and I will get that information back to you, and then actually do follow up with the information.
That's it, is actually doing the follow-up. Because so many times, and I've been guilty of it, is say, I don't know, I've been good at it, I don't know the answer, I'll find out, and then not following up. Right? Yeah. And I've seen that happen too many times, doing the follow-up.
Exactly. It can build or destroy trust by just holding your hands up and then getting that information to them, rather than rambling and trying to piece together an answer that's often, rarely correct. Brilliant, Sherman. That has been such an insightful session. Last question I've got for you before I let you go and enjoy your day. What is the one practical tip that you have for listeners that they can go and apply as soon as they stop listening to this podcast?
Continue to be relentlessly curious. I think that is the one thing that you can't stop being to be successful. I would even go a little bit deeper and say, really be curious about AI today. All the things that AI can do, what it can't do, why it's great. I was at a sales conference, I was at CRO Summit a couple of weeks back, and Gong was presenting, and they put up this big slide, and it said, AI will not replace salespeople. AI will replace salespeople who are not using AI. Something to that extent. And that's so true. Just get in front of it. Try to have an AI first mindset. Make sure you're using, GPT or Claude or whatever, whatever it is, but get in front of it, use it, be the operator of AI. Don't get left behind. Try to incorporate it into your, maybe it's content, maybe it's sequences. And I'm not saying, tell GPT to write a sequence for you, but maybe give you ideas, give you frameworks, give you outlines for things, and then take that human touch. But AI is super powerful, so don't get left behind. Be really curious about AI, what it's doing today, and thinking about what it will be doing tomorrow.
Sherman, thank you so much for joining me. If anyone does want to reach out for a chat, where's the best place? LinkedIn, I guess?
LinkedIn, absolutely. LinkedIn or Sherman at Nyota Ai. Happy to chat.
Love that, Sherman. I hope you have a great day. And to everyone listening, until next time. Next week on the ISP NextGen Podcast.
Initially, I worked in hospitality. I was working in hotels and restaurants, welcoming the people into what was my restaurant, making sure that their experience was as top tier as it could possibly be. Understanding the nuance and behaviors and being sensitive to the way that people respond to you is a transferable skill that in sales goes so far.